Hey there, folks. Welcome to Broadband Deployment News. WISPA, which is the Association for Wireless Internet Service Providers, has sent a letter to the NTIA requesting them to reject, or in a sense, have states cure their initial proposals because those proposals are not really clear on whether that state's going to be able to reach 100% broadband coverage for all of their citizens. And then they also have an issue with some of the states requiring more than 1 year of financial or audited financial statements. Be right back with more. We'll go through that. And again, thank you for joining me. Rick Husey here with Z-Quorum. So I wanted to look at this. I think WISPA's got some good points here in some cases. In other cases, I think it's just that the initial proposals maybe were not clear, and maybe they do need to be made clear. But you see here, this is the WISPA. I've linked to this website. And then right here, you'll see that they've got on their blog the letter that they sent to the NTIA. I also have a link to that letter directly. And then a few other things I want to look at as far as how these states might be able to cover all of their citizens with broadband from the recent ACA framework, the BEAD funding framework. So first, let's look at the letter. So again, I'll link to this as well. So you see here, this is sent to the NTIA to Alan Davidson. And they start out congratulating him. Congratulations on beginning the process of reviewing the initial proposals. The review and approval process will be critical to ensuring success of the BEAD program and its promises of universal service and expanded digital equity. Universal service is kind of key because one of the things that the BEAD program is shooting for is 100% coverage of reliable broadband service for every person in the United States and in these territories. And that would mean that you'd be able to get 100 by 20 or better, basically. You know, obviously we'd prefer more than that, and if the majority of people get fiber, they certainly are more than capable of getting well above 100 by 20. But that is the goal, is to have everybody get at least 100 by 20 by a reliable broadband technology. It says, however, based on a review of the draft initial proposals, WISPA is greatly concerned that several are significantly misaligned with congressional objectives and BEAD program guidelines in ways that will undermine these states' abilities to successfully reach 100% of all unserved locations and meet non-deployment objectives such as digital equity. Well, I think those objectives are nice, but I think the main objective is to get everybody, certainly for their BEAD program, there's a digital equity separate funding for that. And there is some digital equity stuff in the BEAD as far as what could be done with that and scoring. But the main thing is trying to make sure that everybody everywhere can get broadband, again, at least 100 by 20, preferably 100 by 100 and more. Of the most significant note, at least 5 states have indicated that a planned over-reliance on funding fiber infrastructure is likely to exhaust BEAD funds before all unserved and underserved locations are connected, dangerously contemplating the possibility of failing to live up to the primary goal of the BEAD program, ensuring that every unserved and underserved location is connected to broadband service at 100 by 20 at a minimum. This goal is the cornerstone of the BEAD program, and it's vital that every state lays out a clear vision for achieving it. I would agree with that. We ask that NTIA require these states to cure their proposals before they're approved. Then it goes through some of the states and what's in there. I've got a few of them that I highlighted just because I want to dive more deeply into those. But we see here Maryland's draft proposal states, Maryland's internal modeling suggests that the funds available can provide for fiber to the premises to the vast majority of unserved locations in Maryland and potentially to most of the underserved locations. So that's great. However, OSB does not know, given current inflationary pressures and projected demand for broadband construction labor and materials during the BEAD deployment process, that Maryland will have sufficient funds to address the needs of all unserved and underserved locations, as well as community anchor institutions. Well, if they're able to get to the vast majority, then they should be able to align their funds and figure out funding so that they can use other technologies other than fiber. It says they can get most of the way with fiber here. Or does it say that? Yeah, fiber to the premise to the vast majority of locations. So WISPA, again, they're an association for wireless internet service providers. So they are sticking up for their members, and for, their members have been providing internet and closing the digital divide for I think they mentioned in here 20, 25 years. So that is important. These tend to be smaller operators, and there's going to be, unfortunately, there's going to be less and less opportunity for WISPs in this country for two reasons. One, we've got all of the funding that's going to be putting fiber in places that maybe traditionally have been just served by WISP, by wireless internet service providers. And then also you've got the larger carriers. You've got T-Mobile and you've got Verizon, AT&T that are coming out with 5G service, mobile obviously, but also doing fixed wireless access using that. So that's another competitor that these WISPs have to worry about in some of these areas, especially mid-band spectrum that's going to be easier to reach, rural locations. So, but there's still an opportunity for these WISPs that have been in business for lots of years in these areas where fiber is just not going to be reasonable right now. And that's really what I think, WISPA is saying, that that's going to be a situation in lots of these states, and that is a situation in a lot of these states. And I think the states know that. So I haven't read through these initial proposals, and I don't know if it's really not clear what they're doing, but that is something that each state needs to wrestle with, is how much fiber can they do, to maximize the fiber, because that is certainly the most future-proof technology. Once you have it in the ground or in the air, whatever, then you can increase speeds. You can do GPON, that's 1 gigabit per second. You can do XGS-PON, that's 10 gigabits per second. You can do 25 gigabit per second, eventually 50, 100, whatever the next standards are, over the same piece of glass. So that's really kind of key, is you don't need to be changing things out. It's just a matter of the technology and the lasers and how they shoot the light down the fiber that can increase these speeds. So again, it's it's certainly the most future-proof thing, and the thing that we want to focus on. But there are going to be areas where it's just cost prohibitive. You've only got a certain amount of money. You want to do fiber as much as you can, but then you're going to have to reach folks with some other technology. And the other technology that would make sense, if they don't already have DOCSIS, for example, DOCSIS can be upgraded to get over the 100 by 20 pretty easily. But if they don't have DOCSIS, then fixed wireless is your next best bet. DSL isn't going to do it. Satellite, you don't want to be relying on satellite, so fixed wireless is your next bet. And that's what these WISPA folks do. Then it mentions California. California's proposal has submitted states, in the event that BEAD funds are insufficient to deliver fiber to all locations, the CPUC will prioritize projects that serve unserved and underserved locations located in high poverty and persistent poverty counties consistent with the BEAD NOFO, as well as projects to serve locations on tribal lands. Well, that's also not very clear, and it's not stating that they're going to reach everybody. They really need to reach everybody. They say they want to focus on those areas, but they need to be focusing on getting broadband to every single resident there and business in the state. Minnesota's proposal has submitted states. Minnesota does not believe that its BEAD funding allocations will be adequate to fund all applications submitted that would reach all unserved and underserved locations. And this one was a surprise, because they actually, according to the ACA's analysis and Cartesian, ACA and Cartesian, they should have no problem at all reaching all folks in their state, including most of them with fiber. So we'll take a look at that. I want to, again, do a little deeper dive on some of these. New York's proposal, as submitted states, CAO's data suggests that exists a business case with respect to more than 90% of unserved and underserved locations for applicants to request funding for fiber at a level that, when totaled, will be equal to the BEAD funds available. So I think they're saying if they do 90% of their locations, that's going to eat up all of their BEAD funds. Well, then they can't do 90% of their locations with fiber. They have to save some money to be able to do 100%. So again, I don't know if that's what the initial proposal is saying, is that, hey, we're only going to hit 90%. It should say we're going to do maybe, I don't know what it is, 80% with fiber, and then the rest we're going to do with fixed wireless with the remaining funds. And then you got North Carolina. Actually, maybe it's North Carolina. Maybe it wasn't Minnesota. Maybe it's North Carolina that could reach everybody. North Carolina's proposal has submitted states that its goal for deployment is to connect 98% of unserved households and makes no mention of underserved locations. And that's where actually in the ACA Cartesian analysis, they can do 100%, I believe, or close to 100% of all unserved and underserved locations with fiber. So we'll take a look at that. More than a dozen additional states draft initial proposals indicate that funds may be sufficient to fully connect all unserved and underserved locations, but no funds will remain for non-deployment activities such as digital equity projects. And that's certainly, again, that's a decision the state can make. They can say, do we want to maximize fiber everywhere that we can? And, if we can't hit everybody, then fix wireless, let's say, for the rest of the locations, and then have almost nothing left for any other initiatives, such as digital equity, such as promoting broadband services, those kinds of things. That's a decision they need to make. And that's actually the two models that the ACA Cartesian framework looks at, is baseline fiber and maximizing fiber. So again, we'll take a look at that. And I want to take a look at that for these states that I have here. The lack of sufficient BEAD funding these states have identified can be addressed by policy proposals provided by the NTIA for just such a concern, a commitment to setting an appropriately low, extremely high cost per location threshold, and a commitment to deploying appropriate fixed wireless access or other alternative technology solutions that can offer deployment cost savings without sacrificing speed or reliability. And you're always going to sacrifice speed and reliability if you're going away from something other than fiber, because again, it's kind of the gold standard. It's a fixed service. It's fast. It's very reliable. You're not going to get, over fixed wireless, you're not going to get multi-gig, 2 gig, 10 gig service in the future. At least I don't think so. Maybe there's some new technology coming out. But anyway, certainly fiber is you would be sacrificing that, but that's not saying that you're not going to be providing broadband, because again, there's fixed wireless technologies today that can do close to a gig symmetrical, if not a gig symmetrical, if you're looking at certain kinds of technologies and good spectrum. It's certainly possible, and then certainly over 100 by 20. So there we go. The broadband funding optimization tool dashboard developed by the Vernonberg Group and commissioned by WISPA demonstrates on a state-by-state basis that an appropriate mix of fiber and alternative broadband deployment technologies can ensure that every state not only connects all unserved and underserved locations, but also has meaningful funds remaining for non-deployment activities. I'm not familiar with that. That sounds similar to the ACA Cartesian study. We strongly encourage you to work with every state that has expressed concerns about funding shortfalls to make explicit how they envision using the tools provided by NTIA to ensure that the BEAD program meets its goals. And they say they'll be pleased to demonstrate that dashboard at any time. In addition, WISPA is concerned that, and this is a second issue, WISPA is concerned that some states' proposals go beyond the clear BEAD requirement for prospective subgrantees to submit audited financial statements from the prior fiscal year to qualify for eligibility. Some states are seeking to require as many as 5 years of audited financial statements just to participate in the application process. That's even before they get any money. A gating criteria that will foreclose participation by many smaller broadband providers, and that's whether they're wireless or a small cable operator, small fiber operator, independent operators. This really is a significant issue. Audited financial statements can cost between $25,000 and $50,000 per year, and many smaller broadband providers would rather use that amount to deploy broadband service instead of obtaining audited financial statements as table stakes. Requiring applicants to submit more than the previous year's audited financial statements up front will contravene NTIA's express guidance and will have the effect of foreclosing smaller providers that lack financial statements from participating in the BEAD program, reducing competition for grants and increasing the likelihood that many areas suitable for smaller providers to serve will not be the subject of a grant application. In addition, states should only require audited financial statements after they have been awarded funding, not up front. So yeah, if you think about it, lots of larger providers, public providers, are having to get these statements done anyway. So that's not anything for them. They've got their financial statements. But if you're not public, you're independent, you've got to go out and get that. And as you can see here, it's costly. So this is similar. This is another hurdle for small providers. One thing they did fix was the letter of credit. They made some concessions there. So those are the kinds of things where it's you understand the reason for it. So you understand the reason for the letter of credit. They found some alternatives there, but you want to make sure that our tax dollars are going to companies that are going to be able to deliver, that they're not going to default in the middle of this, and then we're going to have other issues. So you want to make sure that, again, financially, these companies are financially stable. So that's why they're requiring a audited financial statement, but just the prior year. So if we take a look at the BEAD NOFO, here's what it says. Under audited financial statements, this is on page 73, it says each prospective subgrantee shall submit to the eligible entity, that's the state from which it seeks funding, financial statements from the prior fiscal year that are audited by an independent certified public accountant. If the potential subgrantee has not been audited during the ordinary course of business, and again, the public company would have been, in lieu of submitting audited financial statements, it must submit unaudited financial statements from the prior fiscal year and certify that it will provide financial statements from the prior fiscal year that are audited by an independent certified public accountant by a deadline specified by the eligible entity. An eligible entity shall not approve any grant for the deployment or upgrading of network facilities unless it determines that the documents submitted to it demonstrate the prospective subgrantee's financial capability with respect to the proposed project. So it just specifies 1 year. Now, you could read that second paragraph, I suppose, as saying if they really want to determine that, or for this subgrantee to demonstrate that they have the financial capability, maybe they need to get more than one. But again, the costs involved in that are significant, and the burden on these smaller operators is significant. So that doesn't really make sense because, again, one of the things that NTIA would like to do is have lots of different kind of providers participate in this, including small community operators, not necessarily owned by the community, but independent operators. They don't necessarily want to have big MSOs and big fiber operators in every location. They would like to have municipalities in there. They'd like to have electric membership co-ops, rural electric co-ops in there. But I'm sure they don't want to exclude small operators that have been providing service in adjacent areas. If you've got a small independent cable company, an independent telephone company that's got fiber service, and there's an area that they'd like to edge out in, but it's been too expensive. Now they can get BEAD funding. This would be a significant burden on them, as they're stating here. It'd be better for them to be able to put that money that they'd have to pay for additional audited financial statements toward putting in the broadband and not doing that. So it mentions the states here. You've got Massachusetts and Nevada requiring 5 years, then Connecticut, Maryland, Michigan, Missouri, New York, North Carolina, Oregon, and Rhode Island requiring 3 years, and you got Colorado and Tennessee requiring 2 years. So there you go. That's even 2 years is an extra, double the amount that, as far as the costs and burden, double the amount that BEAD's requiring, the BEAD NOFO. Then it mentions here again, on behalf of WISPA members who for 20 years have been working to close the digital divide by utilizing all technologies, including wireless spectrum, licensed, lightly licensed, and unlicensed, fiber, cable, satellite. We appreciate your attention to this matter. So anyway, I think they make some good points here. Now, I don't know if it's any more clear in the rest of these proposals whether how much they'll be covering, if they're saying that they're going to cover 100%. I'm assuming not, since it mentions in the letter here they're pulling these comments out, and it sounds like maybe they're not saying they could get to 100%. So that would be a problem. And then again, there is the problem of these, audited financials. So I want to take a look at this. I went through this the other day in a broadcast. This is the latest version of ACA and Cartesian's framework to allocate funding for broadband, version 4.0. And I linked to this as well. And on this, you can get a national overview of their framework, and then you can look at each state and see what they believe about that. And they're looking at the amount of money that the state's supposed to get. They're taking some other factors into account, such as matches by the subgrantees, how much additional funding prior to BEAD, committed funds are going in there, what they think the amount of unserved and underserved locations will be in June 2024, when a lot of these states will start subgranting this money. So they're taking all that into account. So I want to look at a couple of these states that were in here in this letter. So for example, let's take a look. So the first one, let's look at Maryland again. So it says, Maryland's internal modeling suggests the funds available can provide for fiber to the premise to the vast majority of unserved locations, and potentially to most of the underserved locations. So they're not, again, they're saying they can't necessarily reach everywhere. Well, if we look at Maryland, this is from their state, the ACA Cartesian analysis for this state. So basically what they're looking at on this analysis is they're saying, they show here the amount of money first that they're supposed to get. So they're supposed to get $268 million in funding. They're estimating the match to be, right here, make this a little bigger. So we're estimating the match to be $118 million. So they're saying estimated total of $385 million. And then they're looking at the unserved and underserved locations as of June 2024. So they're taking the information from the National Broadband Map and they're extrapolating forward from that, looking at some factors here. So they're looking at how many funded locations there are that should be added based on committed funds. That, this would be RDOF, would be, does it have it down here? It doesn't, I don't think it says on these, but it would be RDOF, USDA Reconnect, and then I think not even included in here would be ARPA funds like the Capital Projects Fund. I don't think they have that tracked in the National Broadband Map, so they're not necessarily even including that. But they're saying when you add those things in and then also incremental builds, then they're saying that you're going to drop, this was the original, you got, what is it, unserved, 36.4 thousand, then you've got underserved 19.5. They're saying that drops to 24.9 and 14.7. So that's where these numbers are coming for, the 24.9 and 14.7. So they're extrapolating forward to June of 2024, saying that's what it should look like then. And then based on that, they've got their two funding scenarios, or deployment scenarios, I should say. So baseline fiber is where the state looks at their extremely high cost threshold and they say, we're going to go ahead and fund fiber just up to that, and then everything after that we're going to do with a alternative technology like fixed wireless. And then maximum fiber says, and that's on unserved locations. Then maximum fiber says, we're just going to start looking at all unserved and underserved locations and fund as many of them as we can with fiber. And then we're going to look at alternative technologies. And, we're not going to worry so much about what's remaining in the budget. We're going to try to get 100% coverage and still maximize fiber. So in those two scenarios, and this is for, again, we're looking at Maryland here. So for Maryland, we're saying in the baseline fiber model, and both these models, and actually for every state in the country, they say every state in the country can get 100% coverage. It's just a question of how much of it will be fiber, and that will depend on which route you go here. So they're saying 100% of locations can be reached, 60% fiber if you do the baseline fiber model. And if you do, then you'll have 104 million remaining in the budget to do things like digital equity and broadband adoption, those kinds of things. Then you've got maximum fiber. Again, that's trying to reach as many unserved and underserved locations as you can until it gets ridiculously expensive, and then you're going to use the alternative technologies. And then they're saying you can get up to 86% fiber, and you've got your total capital being pretty much what they have here, 385 million. That's what they get from BEAD plus matching funds. They're going to max it out, and they've got nothing left. So obviously they need to be careful here and make sure they don't overdo it, because they got zero left. So maybe there's a little bit less. They want to maybe 80% fiber and make sure you have a little bit left over in case you got cost overruns. But that's what they're saying that we have for Maryland. Then if we look at, let's take a look here. What was it? The next one was Minnesota I want to look at. So their proposal states they don't believe that its BEAD funding allocation will be adequate to fund all applications submitted that would reach all unserved and underserved locations. So they're saying, again, they don't think they can do it. But if you look at, here we got Minnesota, this is again the ACA analysis. They're saying that by the time we get to June 2024, their unserved locations should be 74,000 roughly, 74,500, and then 46,700 for underserved locations. Their funding that they're getting is $652 million. Their estimated match is, $362 million. So, that's a good size match. And some states are requiring, I don't know if this is based on the proposal where they're saying it's going to be that percentage, but $362 million. So they're up to $1 billion basically in estimated total capital. And in that scenario, with the two deployment scenarios, I should say, you've got your baseline fiber that can get them up to 53% fiber, or you got a maximum fiber deployment, which can get them to 67%. not that big a difference on this one compared to the other. And again, you've got zero remaining here. You've got 220 million here for other remaining kinds of broadband initiatives. So again, ACA says you should have no problem reaching 100% of locations. That's all unserved and underserved locations. It's just a question of whether you want to do somewhere around 53% fiber or 67% fiber, and how much do you want left over. Then we've got the next state, which was New York, that I wanted to look at. Their proposal says, their data suggests that there exists a business case with respect to more than 90% of unserved and underserved locations for the applicants to request funding for fiber at that level. When totaled, it will be equal to the BEAD funds, all the BEAD funds available. So they're saying they can hit 90% fiber and then they're done. They can't do anything else. Well, that, I don't know if they're saying that they won't do something else or they're just making a statement here. So again, if they can get a certain percentage of fiber, they should save money to be able to do some other technology. So here we've got New York. So what ACA is showing there is about 76,000 unserved locations and almost 11,000 underserved locations. That's not very many. Their budget is $665 million. If they do an estimated provider match of $256 million, that gets them to $920 million. So getting close to $1 billion there. And then this is what ACA says they can do. And you can see here, it's interesting. So we've got 100% of the locations reached on the baseline fiber and the maximum fiber, as every state is. And that then you've got 56% fiber locations if they go with the baseline fiber model. And they've got 320 million left for other initiatives. But they can get to 93% fiber. And that would be, again, 100% locations covered. So they're saying 93% of them will be covered by fiber. The rest would be by something like most likely fixed wireless. And then, again, zero left over. So you're not leaving anything for anything else. But that's a huge difference going from 56% to 93%. You'd want to go closer to this. Maybe you say 90% and leave a little bit left over, again, just as margin to make sure that you reach everybody, and then you could use that for some other initiatives. So that's New York's analysis. And then let's look at the final one, North Carolina. Their proposal as submitted states that its goal for deployment is to connect 98% of unserved households and makes no mention of underserved locations. And I'm wondering if in their proposal they're just saying unserved, if they didn't use the definitions under the BEAD, NOFO. Unserved is everything 25 by 3 or less, and underserved is between 25 by 3 and 100 by 20. I wonder if they meant everybody here, 98%, both unserved and underserved. But in any event, if we look at the BEAD analysis from ACA on this, they're showing that as of June 2024, they should have 166,000 approximately unserved locations. That's quite a bit more than the other states we were looking at there. And then we've got underserved locations of 101.4 thousand. So their estimated BEAD funding, so they're getting up 1.5 billion. When you throw in the estimated provider match, that gives them 2.3 billion. That's a lot to work with. And so what ACA is saying here, and that's interesting. So again, if we look back at the BEAD, so this is where I think there's a misunderstanding. If we look back at the BEAD letter, it says they can reach 98% of unserved households. And this BEAD analysis from ACA says 98% of households, this is unserved and underserved, 98% with fiber, 100% both, get reached, 98% with fiber. This is on the baseline fiber model. And they can have 747 million remaining in their budget. Or if they go with the maximized fiber, they can hit everybody with fiber and still have $676 million left in their budget for other initiatives. So obviously you'd want to go this route. There's very little risk there. If you just go ahead and go 100% fiber, you still got plenty of money left over. So again, I think that however North Carolina, and again, I didn't read through the proposal. I don't know if they are more clear in the rest of the proposal, but based on what WISPA pulled out, I don't see how North Carolina, based on ACA's analysis, I don't see how North Carolina could think that they could only reach 98% of unserved locations. According to ACA, they can reach 98% of all unserved and underserved locations with fiber. on the baseline model and 100% of them all on their max fiber here. So North Carolina is looking pretty good there. So anyway, I wanted to delve into that a little bit to see a little further what WISPA was saying and how it compared to what ACA was saying. So anyway, I think that's pretty interesting. And I think, again, WISPA, I think they make some really good points on that, in that if the states are not clear, that's assuming if the states are not clear, then the NTIA should come back. Like, let's say North Carolina wasn't clear, even though it looks like even though North Carolina maybe is thinking, hey, we can get 98% fiber, we can reach everybody, they agree with the ACA stuff, then the NTIA needs to come out, go back and say, hey, can you be more clear here on what you mean? Again, I didn't read through it. I don't know exactly what it says, but that would be, I think, good for the NTIA to clarify all of these states to make sure that they are doing what they need to do to get every single business and residents access to broadband service of at least 100 by 20. And then there's community anchor institutions that would be the next step. But a lot of those are already served by, honestly, the service provider, wherever that is. So if it's a community anchor institution and you've got an area that has access to fiber or fixed wireless, certainly fiber, they're going to be able to get gig symmetrical service, and they could get it from the provider there. It doesn't necessarily have to be not by the provider in the area, if that makes sense. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. I thought this was interesting. If it was interesting for you, if you'd give me a thumbs up on the video, I'd appreciate it. And if you are not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you'll get a little notification in your browser when I am live. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.